Good morning, and from the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with your tropical storm Chantal briefing on this Saturday morning, 11:30 a.m., Saturday, July 5th, 2025. So the tropical depression has been upgraded earlier this morning to tropical storm Chantal, and this briefing will cover central North Carolina impacts. So bear with me here for just a second while I show a different screen. Okay, here's current conditions, and I've got here radar, I've got here satellite, visible satellite, and I've got temperatures. And you can see the center of the storm is analyzed kind of right where you see this first um, T there, that dot there. Pressure 1,007 millibars, max gust 45 knots. Moving pretty much due north fairly slowly, but moving nonetheless. The initial outer bands are already crossing the Carolina coast here. In fact, all the way north is the northern Outer Banks, but a couple bands here moving across the Crystal Coast and the Wilmington area, as well as the South Carolina coast. For us here in central North Carolina, as you can see on visible satellite, and as I look out my window, I see clear skies, which is not unusual on the periphery, outer periphery of these storms. Sometimes you get subsidence and sinking air, and we do have clear skies, temperatures climbing through the mid 80s. So for us today, it's going to be another hot day. So again, be cognizant of heat precautions. It's possible that by later today, one of these bands, far outer bands, could work its way up towards the I-95 corridor. So if you are doing some outdoor activities for the holiday weekend and you're in central North Carolina, again, don't be surprised if one of these furthest outer bands happens to make a run towards central North Carolina. Okay, so let's go back to the slides here, and bear with me here for just a second while I switch screens. There's the slides. And the 11 o'clock briefing obviously has come out. Tropical Storm Chantal, maximum sustained winds 40 miles per hour. And you can see the track there. Again, is I remind people yet again, the cone only shows where the center of the storm, the middle of it, is likely to go. Okay, so the center of the storm could track anywhere within that cone. The cone does not convey impacts and how far away impacts may be. So remember, impacts can occur away from the cone. But for us in central North Carolina and the National Weather Service Raleigh coverage area, we're expecting a couple inches of rain that will focus on the Sandhills and coastal plain and maybe up towards the Triangle region. The rain could be heavy at times, particularly on Sunday. There could be some isolated instances of flooding, poor drainage areas, low-lying areas. We can't rule out an isolated tornado, but the risk is pretty small. You know, I would imagine there's probably not a lot of folks well, I mean, obviously it's a holiday weekend, so I'm sure the beaches are pretty crowded, right? But if you know anybody who is down at the coast and they're trying to enjoy some time at the beach in between these rain bands, please call them and remind them to watch out for the threat of rip currents and dangerous surf. And you know, it's probably honestly just today I would not be on the beach or even trying to swim. Okay, obviously you have to dodge some rain, but again, if you have any family, friends, or know anybody down there, call them and tell them don't go into the water if they can avoid it. And if they, for whatever reason, need to or want to, make sure they go where there's lifeguards, because there's a dangerous threat of rip currents today and tomorrow and probably the next day. All right, so again, I've kind of already alluded to this, mostly a rain event and flash flood risk. Here's some simulated radar for timing. And these are in basically 12-hour intervals, except for the first two. There's a well, actually 6-hour intervals, except for the first two, which are 12-hour intervals. But I included the one in the upper left to kind of show you how, one of these outer bands could make it a run towards I-95, maybe even the coastal plain, and that's by this evening at 6 p.m. But the real heavier rain and more steadier rain is expected to move in during the morning tomorrow on Sunday, and there could be a period of steady, maybe occasionally heavy rain that moves across the Sandhills region, the coastal plain. Some of these outer bands may get up to the Triad. And then that will basically continue through the daytime. By 6 p.m. in the evening, we'll have that heavier rain lifting up towards the Triangle region. And by midnight tomorrow night, we're going to see that rain start to maybe consolidate as it's moving north of the Triangle region up towards the I-95 corridor, northern I-95 corridor, I should say. And then by 6 a.m. Monday, the heavier rain should be exiting. Okay, so the bottom line here is we could see a stray shower, early as this evening, but the heaviest, steadiest, worst of the rains expected during the daytime tomorrow into the evening, and then wrapping up early Monday. Okay, so that's your timeline, and that's what the simulated radar is there for, to give you a sense of timing. Not necessarily, don't use these for amounts or intensity. Use this mainly as a guide for timing. All right. Okay, so what about the wind? You're probably thinking, well, if the center of the storm might track right up through, the I-95 corridor, central North Carolina, are we going to get some wind? And the idea is that, maybe, we get a little bit of windy at times, but there's only about a 1 in 10 chance for wind speeds to reach tropical storm force. Okay, so up around 40 miles per hour or more, that it's only about a 1 in 10 chance. So the expectation is winds will remain below 40 miles per hour across central North Carolina, with the highest likelihood of tropical storm force winds across the southeast portions of central North Carolina. We're talking like Sampson County might get close to tropical storm in gusts. Speaking of those numbers, here is our maximum wind gust forecast for the next 3 days. And you can see today in the upper left, we're only expecting to get to the, this is a pretty typical day, right? 10 to 20 mile per hour wind gusts could happen on any day. And you'll notice there during the daytime Sunday, which is in the upper right, that's the highest wind gusts would be expected across coastal areas in southeast part of North Carolina. It's possible we could see an isolated gust to 25 miles per hour across central North Carolina, but again, the worst of the wind is expected to remain east of I-95 and more specifically closer to the coast. And then, by Monday, things will be pretty much wrapped up in terms of wind across central North Carolina. All right, let's shift our attention to rainfall. So we are now in what we call probabilistic era for rainfall forecasts. That is, of the dozens and dozens of models that we use to predict rainfall, we like to show what is the most likely, what is the low end amount, and what is the high end amount. So what I'm showing you here is on the left, okay, this rainfall forecast is that basically 90% of the models have amounts higher than this, okay? So in other words, you could take it to the bank that you're gonna get at least this much rain using the graphic on the left, okay? So you're pretty much, 90% of higher liquid precipitation. So in other words, again, this is probably the second time I'm explaining this, but you're gonna see at least this much, right? So, a 1/4 inch of rain in the Triangle region, 3/4 of an inch of rain along the I-95 corridor, and so on. Now, on the right is the 1 in 10 chance, meaning that essentially 90% of the models have less less than this. Okay, 90% of the models have less rain than what is shown here. Okay, and only 10% have higher. Okay, so consider this the reasonable worst case scenario. Okay, so if you're in the triad, the worst case scenario is about 1.5 to 2 inches of rain. If you're up in the northern I-95 corridor, your worst case scenario is about 2 inches of rain. If you're in the triangle region, your worst case scenario is about 2 inches of rain. If you're down in Fayetteville, your worst case scenario is about 3.25 inch of rain. Okay, so basically the worst case scenario is essentially 1.5 inches north and northwest to about 3.5 inches across the southeast. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. Now, the most likely scenario, which is this right here, is kind of something in the middle, right? So the most likely rainfall amount is about 1/4 to upwards of 1 inch of rain west of the triangle region, okay, the triad, let's say, and up towards the Virginia border, with about 1/2 to 1.5 inches across the triangle. The heaviest amounts down near Fayetteville, which about 1.5 to 2.5 inches, and another pocket of heavier rain, about 1 inch to 2 inches across the areas just east of the Charlotte metro area. So we're talking Albemarle down towards Stanley County, Montgomery County, perhaps a pocket of heavier rain. That's the most likely. Now, I want to take this opportunity to show you this website right here. And by the way, I'm going to email these slides out as soon as we're done here. But this website, click on this link, and this is going to take you to a very, very useful web page. And this is the probabilistic rainfall portal, or probabilistic precipitation portal. Okay, and this is what you're going to get here. And this is, again, just for rainfall. So go ahead and zoom into your area of concern, right? And then the default display is the official forecast, the expected amount. If you want to see what is the worst case scenario, click on the high end amount, and that will show you the maps that I just showed you on the slides. If you want to see the low end amount, okay, then that is this button right here, and that will show you the low end amount. But I'll tell you, one of the best features of this web page is the ability to click on these little dots here and the little boxes that pop up. So I'm going to go down to Fayetteville, and I'm going to click on this circle right here, and look at this box that pops up here. So what it tells you is the low end amount, so expect at least 0.8 inches, okay? You could have as much as 3.2, with the most likely being 2.1 inches. So, and the exceedance probabilities below that are incredibly useful, because this gives you a sense of, where do things really drop off, okay? And you can see that, all the way up to 1/2 inch, the probability of getting up to 1/2 inch is greater than 90%, okay? But 1 inch, it only drops down to 85%. So in other words, you could probably take it to the bank you're going to get at least 1 inch of rain in Fayetteville. But look how the probabilities drop off as you get to 2 inches. So if 2 inches is a rainfall amount concern of yours, then your likelihood is about 52% of getting 2 inches of rain. But look how it drops to 16% as you get to 3 inches. So the likelihood of getting 3 inches of rain really falls off. Okay. And if you're concerned, well, what if we get more than that? What's the likelihood of getting 4 inches of rain or more? Well, that drops off to almost nothing. Okay, so this is a great way to convey what can I expect, what am I almost guaranteed to get, which would be these higher values, higher probability values, I should say, greater than 90%. What is sort of in the middle? Well, middle probability, that's up to 2 inches. And what's almost no probability, that's this 4 inch and greater, okay? So again, click that link on that slide. And again, any of these white dots you could click on. If you're in the triad, let's say Winston-Salem, you click on these white dots, you can see your 90% is like, it starts dropping off much quicker at these lower values. Okay, so things really start to drop off probability wise after you hit an inch. Okay. So definitely make use of that tool. I think it's incredibly helpful, and it's linked right here at the top. All right, so in terms of what will this mean in flash flood potential? Well, essentially all areas south and east of the triad are in our level 1 risk, a marginal risk for flash flooding. These are the areas that are most likely to see flash flooding tomorrow, okay? All right, in terms of the tornado risk, isolated tornadoes can't be ruled out, but the area with the greatest risk will be across the far southeast portion of North Carolina, and that would actually be today and tonight for that tornado risk there in the Wilmington metro area. All right, so key takeaways. Heavy rainfall and isolated flooding is possible Sunday, maybe into early Monday, but that would be kind of like, in the very early part of Monday, primarily across the Sandhills and coastal plain where we think the heaviest rain is going to fall. Again, some low-lying and poor drainage flooding will be possible. Can't rule out some wind gusts up to 25 miles per hour in the Sandhills and southern coastal plains Sunday into Monday. So, and again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention an isolated tornado can't be ruled out. Okay, I'll add that bullet in there before I send these slides out. All right, so that's our webinar for today. I'll be sending these slides out here as soon as we wrap up, and then I'll freshen them up and send out a fresh set by 5 p.m. today. And then as far as tomorrow in a webinar, we'll see how it evolves. If things really kind of, if there's any major updates to the forecast in terms of expectations, we'll do a webinar tomorrow. But if nothing changes, if what I just laid out here in this webinar is pretty much what we're expecting tomorrow, then we'll probably forgo that and just have email briefings. Okay. So, but if anything looks like, if we see any major changes, major updates, with something different than what I just conveyed, then we'll do another webinar tomorrow. Okay, so so in other words, if you don't get a webinar invitation, that means what I just told you here is still the most likely outcome. Okay, all in all, a pretty I would say a lower end event, but some places could get some localized flash flooding, and an isolated tornado can't be ruled out. All right. So that is our briefing for 11:30.